Chapter 431. The undead corpse king was described in the manual to be impervious to all weapons, immune to water and fire, and capable of killing a large group of people with just a breath. Those who died at its hands would then be skinned and turned into new undead corpses themselves. Seemingly recalling something, Bradley's furrowed brows slowly relaxed as he chuckled. Mr. Nash is a golden amulet master. The undead corpse king may not be a match for him. Undead corpses are only called kings if they've existed for over 300 years. The undead corpse in the King of Medicine's tomb was likely buried with Leopold. A top-tier celestial master might not be able to deal with an undead corpse king of this level either. Anders' aged face had turned ashen. At this moment, Derek approached with an unkind look on his face. "Old man Anders, are you saying that we should leave the tomb right now?" Anders looked up at Derek and replied coolly, "This undead corpse king is beyond your imagination. If we don't leave, we'll all die here." Derek laughed dismissively. "You plan on sneaking back in after we leave, aren't you? We went through so much trouble to get here and now you're trying to scare us away. Do you really think we're that gullible? Wisdom eludes those who have no fear. Whatever more I say to you would be useless." Anders responded. Anders was a well-known figure in the industry and could not help but feel a surge of anger now as a young man had just belittled him. "Old man, if you're afraid of death, then get lost. Don't get in our way," Derek said with a condescending expression. They had already discussed among themselves earlier and decided to drive Anders away to avoid the possibility that he might be a spy sent by another faction. "You!" Anders' face turned red with anger. Zeno casually played with his gold-plated Desert Eagle pistol and said, "You'd better leave before I decide to take action." Now that they were in this practically isolated space that was the King of Medicine's tomb, killing Anders would not pose any trouble. "What are you doing?" Bradley hissed when he saw the situation getting out of control as he quickly stepped in front of Anders. Anders was getting agitated as well. He pushed Bradley aside and looked at Zeno, saying, "Since all of you seem so impatient with me, you might as well just shoot me." He then closed his eyes with a determined expression. Zeno was initially surprised, but then his face stiffened as he aimed his gun directly at Anders. "You think I wouldn't dare?" He was one of the 4 major underworld kingpins in Jonesville. While some prominent figures were off the table, he had no qualms about killing this traitor. "Zeno!" Just then, Nash and Melody were done jotting down a map of the King of Medicine's tomb. They were now descending the rope. "Mr. Nash, this old man wants us to leave the tomb. It's likely he's a spy," Zeno replied while Derek and Nico nodded in agreement. Finn and Ken, on the other hand, watched the situation with cold eyes. "Enough. I saved him. You're not thinking of killing him now, are you?" Nash pushed Zeno's gun aside with his hand. Anders said, "Mr. Nash, the undead corpse king is not something we can handle. Listen to my advice. Take them and leave this place quickly." Zeno could not stop himself from lifting up the gun again when he heard the old man trying to get them to leave. However, it was at this moment that there was another explosion from the opposite wall. Chapter 432. Old Herrera, jump now, Daniel shouted with a pale expression. Old Herrera tied the rope of the grappling hook dug into a rock around him and then jumped down without hesitation. His hands rubbed against the rope, tearing his skin. However, he did not dare let go. The cave entrance was 100 meters above the ground, and a fall from that height would be fatal for an ordinary person. A deep, muffled roar resounded again. Daniel immediately grabbed the rope and jumped down. Just as he leaped out of the cave, a humanoid monster covered in green fur appeared at the entrance. It stood 2 meters tall and had a pair of sharp white fangs in its mouth. Its eerie red eyes gave it the appearance of an ape or a monkey. An oppressive aura instantly filled the entire tomb chamber. An undead corpse king. Anders' pupils contracted sharply, and he felt a shiver run through him from the top of his head. Even his heart rate had slowed down significantly. Nash had also sensed an extremely dangerous presence at this moment. The undead corpse king stood at the entrance, looking down at old Herrera and Daniel on the ground like a predator waiting for its prey to flee. Old Herrera's hands were covered in blood. The moment he landed, He quickly ran in the direction where people were, with Daniel following closely. It was not until the two had run quite some distance that the undead Corpse King jumped down from the cave entrance. The moment he landed, the undead Corpse King's muscular legs bent slightly, and spider web-like cracks appeared on the rocky ground. In the next second, his figure vanished. In the blink of an eye, Daniel was pinned to the ground by the undead Corpse King. Old Herrera stopped in his tracks and let out a loud shout. He wanted to run back and rescue his friend, but Daniel shouted hysterically, "Go! Get out of here!" Daniel knew there was no escaping once the undead Corpse King had caught him. He did not want old Herrera to meet the same fate. Tears streamed down old Herrera's face as he turned back around and continued running forward. He could hear from behind him the sounds of the undead Corpse King devouring his friend's flesh and drinking his blood. On the other hand, Bradley and the others had all gone pale. Heidi closed her eyes and hid behind Melody. Melody herself could not bear to look directly forward and turned her head to the side. Even Nash, who had seen his fair share of blood, felt his stomach churn at this moment. While he often rolled in piles of corpses, it was the first time he had witnessed another creature feasting on human flesh. Zeno took out a magazine from his backpack and replaced it. Nico and Derek had already taken out some bundled explosives. After the undead Corpse King devoured Daniel's body, he then stood up, preparing to hunt down his next target. Old Herrera used all his strength to run toward Anders, shouting, "Mr. Anders, save me!" The undead Corpse King was incredibly fast, so fast that his movements were almost imperceptible to the naked eye. All that could be seen was a flash of green before he appeared in front of old Herrera. He reached out with hands that were crowned with dark nails and gripped old Herrera's neck with a bloody, eerie smile. 3 gunshots rang out as the bullets hit the back of the undead Corpse King's head. However, they seemed merely like small stones striking a sandbag, unable to penetrate the undead Corpse King's skin. How is this possible? Zeno's eyes widened in disbelief. His gold-plated gun had been specially customized to have more than 3 times its original power. Normally, no living creature could withstand a bullet from it. Even a martial artist like Nash, who was of the profound reality realm, would not really dare allow themselves to be hit by these bullets. There was a roar. Chapter 433. In his fury, the undead Corpse King abandoned old Herrera and rushed toward Zeno. He was so fast that Zeno did not even manage to blink before the undead Corpse King was already right in front of him. Both Derek and Nico, who had been standing in front of Zeno, were sent flying by the shockwave caused by the high-speed impact. Bradley and Anders also fell to the ground while Melody and Finn promptly activated their inner energy to protect themselves. Still, they were forced several meters back, staggering. It was only then that they realized what Anders had said earlier were not exaggerations. The undead Corpse King's red eyes were fixed on Zeno, his cool breath sending shivers down Zeno's spine. The rest of the group remained silent, not daring to breathe too loudly, for fear of triggering him to attack Zeno. Heavenly Sword Technique. At some point, Nash had changed into the Heavenly Master's garb that had been passed down by his master. It contained inscribed formations that possessed strong suppression capabilities against malevolent entities. 81 copper coins made up the Heavenly Sword, and with a thrust, a golden radiance struck the undead Corpse King's chest. Strangely, it absorbed Nash's attack, and ripples formed on its chest. Nash's expression shifted slightly as he rushed toward the undead Corpse King with swift steps. The undead Corpse King realized Nash's strength and turned his attention away from Zeno. He lunged at Nash with his teeth and claws bared. When the undead Corpse King's claws clashed with the Heavenly Sword, sparks flew as the sound of metal striking pierced the air. Nash's eyes narrowed. He was impressed. This undead Corpse King's power was comparable to that of the later stages of the profound reality realm. Dealing with him was proving to be quite challenging. At the same time, the undead Corpse King's crimson eyes were fixed on Nash. He looked both wary and furious. The undead Corpse King then let out an enraged roar and attacked Nash with lightning speed. There was no flourish as he used straightforward, beast-like attacks to try and tear his enemy apart. At the same time, Nash used the heavenly sword to deflect his claws continuously. The undead corpse king was simply too fast that Nash could only catch a few glimpses of his claws even with his third eye. In just a few breaths, Nash had been forced to retreat steadily. With each of the undead corpse king's attacks, a significant amount of powdery substance fell from his body. Anders's face turned pale. That's coagulated undead corpse poison powder. Inhaling it will cause immediate infection and lead to pulmonary fibrosis in 3 minutes. Nico and Derek scrambled over to the group while Melody said to Heidi, "You go with old Perry and the others. I'll go help Nash." She had realized then that Nash was no match for the undead corpse king. By helping him, she could at least give him a breather. Heidi nodded earnestly. "Be careful, Melody." Finn pulled out a dagger from behind him and followed Melody as they charged toward the undead corpse king. "Back off, all of you." Nash deflected the undead corpse king's attack with a sword and then waved his large sleeve, using his true energy to force them both back. The undead corpse king seized this opportunity and reached his sharp claws toward Nash's heart. Nash immediately channeled his true energy into the formations in the Heavenly Master's attire, causing them to emit a golden light. The undead corpse king's hand sizzled upon contact with the golden light. Although the formation resisted 80% of the undead corpse king's attacks, Nash was still sent flying by a powerful force. Nash hit the rock wall, several cracks as thick as a thumb slithering through the wall. If he had not been wearing the Heavenly Master garb, his heart would probably have been ripped out. The undead corpse king was too strong. Stronger than any enemy Nash has ever encountered in his life. His strength was comparable to those in the Mystique Loyalty realm, and those within that realm might not be able to beat him even. Nash himself was just of the Profound Reality realm. The undead corpse king roared as he moved toward Nash again. He moved so fast, but Nash managed to use a heavenly sword to block his chest. With his other hand, he took out a heavenly runic incantation and stuck it on the sword. Chapter 434. The talisman burned red, and the heavenly sword turned the same shade. The undead corpse king clamped his claw onto the sword's blade but then immediately let go, his hand scorched. Nash took advantage of this moment to kick the undead corpse king's body with a force of thousands of kilograms, but that only forced him to take a step back. The undead corpse king quickly came back and grabbed Nash's neck. Nash felt as if he was being gripped by 2 large iron pincers. "Mr. Nash! Mr. Nash!" Finn and Melody were horrified. Nash was their pillar of support. If something happened to him, all of them would be buried here. Yet, what could they do? They wanted to help, but the man would not allow it. It was not because he was being cocky. Rather, the undead corpse king's strength had just far exceeded their expectations. The veins in Nash's neck and forehead were pulsing as he struggled to take out a purple talisman from the outer layer of his 8 trigrams bag. This was a demon sealing talisman left by his master, which he had been reluctant to use even when facing a 1,000-year-old zombie. He used his true energy to extract some of his vigor and inject it into the demon sealing talisman. It ignited with purple flames that then enveloped the undead corpse king. The undead corpse king released Nash and stepped back repeatedly while emitting a large amount of toxic gas to combat the flames. Nash leaned on his sword with his guard up. He gasped for breath as he looked at the undead corpse king. Although the demon sealing talisman his master left him was powerful, the creature was not weak. It was still uncertain whether the talisman could completely eliminate him. "Mr. Nash, you're amazing." Finn was so excited that he practically shot to his feet. Nash truly lived up to his reputation. He managed to suppress the undead corpse king in the end. Melody also slowly relaxed then. At that moment, Derek came over with 2 pungent and damp cloth strips. Melody covered her nose, looking disgusted. "What is this?" Grandpa Perry said the piss of a child born of pure light energy according to astrological charts can counteract the corpse's poison. It just so happens that I am that. Derek looked somewhat embarrassed. The secret of him being a child despite being in his 30s was now out. Melody frowned and said, "Put that away. I don't need it." Finn could not afford to think too much and took the cloth strip, tying it around his face. Although the smell was overwhelming, he did not dare to risk the toxic fumes. Bradley approached them then and said sternly, "If you don't want to die, use it right away. This is poison from an undead corpse king. Any contact with it is lethal." Melody furrowed her brows and silently accepted the cloth strip. On the other hand, the undead corpse king's green fur had been completely burned off, and his body was charred. After 3 minutes of the purple flames burning, the undead corpse king collapsed lifelessly on the ground. They all then exhaled as relief flooded through them. Nash, however, did not let his guard down as he still sensed dark energy converging from all directions. There was a low hum when suddenly, the 8 bronze chains connected to the bronze tubes trembled. With a deafening rumble, stone doors on all sides opened at 200 meters high. Following that, 8 coffins appeared from each door, thick dark energy rolling off them. Nash's eyes narrowed, golden light flashing deep in his eyes. Those 8 coffins contained zombies donned in ancient official uniforms. They had green faces, fangs, and were skinny as sticks. Instead of jumping out, the zombies opened their mouths and spat out 8 streaks of red smoke. Subsequently, the zombies turned into dust in the stone hall. The red smoke they released gathered and flew toward the undead corpse king lying on the ground. Nash immediately took out a talisman paper and muttered something under his breath. The talisman burned and conjured a strong wind that blew toward the red smoke. However, the red smoke was not affected at all. Chapter 435. Instantly, blood started flowing from the undead corpse king's 7 orifices. He suddenly opened his eyes as his hair regrew rapidly at a pace visible to the naked eye. Nash was thoroughly shocked. "Quick! Find a way to leave this place." He raised a heavenly sword and rushed toward the undead corpse king. While the main chamber of the King of Medicine's tomb was within reach, their lives were more important than whatever resources could be inside it. In a situation like this where the power difference was too great, they had no choice but to abandon the treasure. At this moment, Heidi called out, "Nash, can you hold on for 3 minutes? I think I've figured out the puzzle behind the 18 rings of doom." Nash responded firmly, 2 minutes. We must leave within 2 minutes." The undead corpse king had already launched an attack against Nash. He swung the heavenly sword while grabbing a piece of talisman paper to confront the creature. The undead corpse king was incredibly powerful, and his resistance to weapons was remarkable, making it difficult to harm him. Nash could only dodge while using the talisman paper to attack from a distance. The talisman paper burned and transformed into various attacks that landed on the undead corpse king. Not wanting to waste any time, Heidi stepped onto the outermost tile, which had the character for person on it. Based on her research with Anders, Bradley, and Nash, she discovered that Leopold had greatly admired a figure later known as the King of Medicine of the Teal dynasty, Solaris. That person had a famous 16-word maxim that roughly translated to, "The value of a human life is immeasurable, worth more than 1,000 pieces of gold. When one provides assistance, their virtue surpasses even this." Each of the maxim's 16 words appeared in sequence within the 180 ancient Salmaris characters in each circle. The last 2 characters were likely either characters equivalent to Leopold or something else. Melody and Finn stood beside Heidi, ready to assist her if any mechanism was needed to be activated to save someone. Heidi was nervous, with only 2 minutes remaining. Time was precious. Nash was buying her, this time with his life. She could not afford any mistakes. The moment she stepped onto the tile, the previously uneven tiles slowly became level with the ground. The mechanisms were still intact. Heidi was delighted. She stepped off the tile and then took a step toward the second circle with the character for life on it. Finn and Melody followed her closely, their nerves on edge as they observed the mechanisms on either side. Reaching the second tile, Heidi took a deep breath. If this doesn't activate the mechanism, then it should be broken. She stepped onto the tile, and it descended, leveling with the ground. Once again, none of the mechanisms were triggered. Heidi looked back at Melody and Finn with joy. "I did it." Melody smiled faintly and said, "Hurry up and open the main chamber. Nash is in great danger." Heidi nodded and continued stepping on the tiles following the order of the 16 characters. On the other side, Zeno and his group were watching Nash and his terrifying battle with the undead Corpse King. Zeno said, "That creature's strength is terrifying. Even Mr. Nash is being chased by it instead of the other way round." Nico gulped. "If it weren't for him, we would all have met our end today." Derek, "You thought that Mr. Law was just trying to scare us earlier. You should go and apologize to him later," Zeno added with a meaningful look. Derek's lips twitched slightly. The audacity of this man to accuse him of it. It was just a moment ago that he himself had pointed a gun at Anders. If anyone should be apologizing, it should be him. Of course, these were just Derek's inner thoughts. He did not dare to say them out loud. "All right, Mr. Hun." Derek forced a smile and responded. He then went back to watching Nash, who had been knocked back by the undead Corpse King. At this moment, Nash's face was grim and dark. His garb had been torn apart by the undead Corpse King. Each of the creature's attacks was infused with tremendous force, and Nash had overestimated his own strength. With a resounding thud, the undead Corpse King threw another punch. Nash managed to dodge in time, and the punch struck the hard rock wall, leaving a hole the size of a bowl.